Welcome back. Today we're going to look at presentation aids. And again, with this technology, it's not always perfect. Part of my screen is getting cut off, but when you review the presentation aids PowerPoint, you'll see the full slide. We're going to look at some things to consider today when putting visuals into your speech. And please look at your book for this as well. Some advantages of visuals is they offer clarity to a topic. They're interesting. Getting to see something is simply going to add interest to your speech. Sometimes seeing visuals help us remember the message. We've seen those really sad commercials with the animals that are neglected or abused, or we've seen sad commercials with children that are malnourished. Generally, what sticks in mind are those images, and that's retention. That's what a good visual does. It helps us remember the message. And a good visual can aid in your credibility as well, or your persuasiveness, and we're going to look at persuasive visuals later. So, some rules to remember. Give a speech, not a slideshow. Your speech is not a PowerPoint presentation. We use PowerPoint to enhance our presentation. And limit the amount of words you have on a slide. Actually, if you look at this slide, it's boring. Nobody wants to see this in a presentation. So I have these notes here, of course, so you can refer back to them. But in a presentation, having a whole bunch of words is really boring. All right, make sure to cite the source of all copyrighted material on the slide. Don't wait until the end. If you aren't sure, just copy and paste the source, the web page where you got that image, right beside or under the image. I try to remember to type photo credit, and then I'll type a colon, and then I'll just copy and paste the site. Most of the time, images can be used without citing for educational purposes, but I like to get in the habit of copying and pasting the source under the image to give credit. Google is not the source. Google, so don't say this came from Google Images. Google just gives us a means to find certain things. So after you use Google, it takes you to a website. That website is the source. And use animation sparingly. A lot of stuff flying in off the screen or off the screen can actually detract and get distracting. But yes, it can detract from your message. So use those sparingly. Some types of presentation aids are pie charts, graphs, you name it. Memes, again, YouTube. It just depends on what you want to use. A good photograph always works as well. So let's look at a few things. Pie charts are good when you want to show percentages. When we get into persuasive speaking, you're probably going to want to use a pie chart or a graph at some point. Pie charts are good for percentages. Avoid more than 6 components. I like to think of it as a real pie. Cutting a pie into more than 6 pieces, you're not going to get enough. So keep the pieces big and clear, and use contrasting color. So when I show you this image, and you're going to have to look in your PowerPoint because the Screencast-O-Matic cuts off my screen, you're going to have to look in your PowerPoint for the full slide. I do have my source cited down here. I got this from ncclimate.ncsu.edu, so NC State's climate website. Sadly, it got cut off in this presentation, but it is here. What I want you to notice, when you have data, I like a title to explain the data. So what I have here is North Carolina tornadoes per F-scale. Now you would need in your speech to explain what the F-scale is. The F-scale was named for Fujita, who came up with this classification of tornadoes. Now I don't think this is used anymore, but we're going to use it for our purposes. What I like about this pie chart, it's very clear. We have a grid here to let us know what we're looking for. F0 is going to represent the mildest tornado, that's in blue, all the way to F4, which is the most severe tornado NC, North Carolina, had experienced at the time of this data. This could go up to F5. So if you look at our pie chart, the majority of our tornadoes have happened in the F0, F1 range. Of course, this would look different if we were in Kansas, but this is for North Carolina. If this were my speech, I need to do what I just did and explain this data. I can't just say, all right, here's my pie chart, and then move on. I have to explain this so that my audience can process it. And so then I would let you know that only a small percentage of our tornadoes have occurred in that more serious F4 range, and that's about 1%. So process this data for your image. Graphs are good for comparisons, and you can use, of course, bars or lines, and always use contrasting color. So again, my source got cut off, but you'll see it in the slideshow. This is, again, from NC State's climate website. These are North Carolina tornadoes per decade. So if this were my speech, I'd want to explain to my audience that this represents the number of deaths, and my decades got cut off, but I have 1950, 60, 70, 80, 90, and 2000. And of course, a lot was going on in 1990 as far as tornadoes go in our state. And if this were my speech, I would explain what's going on here. All right, so text charts are good for listing key ideas, but we do want to remember the 6x6 rule. Those of you who are going on to become teachers, this is a good rule to remember. That just means no more than 6 words across and no more than 6 bullets. That reminds us to limit the amount of words we have on a slide. Again, this is boring. People don't want to see a lot of words, but if you want to reiterate key concepts really quickly, you can using that 6x6 rule. You can look at tables in the PowerPoint. You can also, maps are going to show where. That's in the PowerPoint. Diagrams show how things work. Illustrations can show how things work. They can also be used to inject humor. So again, that's when, and by the way, this is not injecting humor, but this is just a basic diagram that if you can't find it on Google, you can create something in SmartArt, which is what I used for this. And then you can use, of course, memes to inject humor. Customers be like, you still open? And of course we see this tornado, and I did give photo credit to quickmeme.com. And then this is another meme that I used from quickmeme.com. So have fun with your visuals. These are what make your speech exciting, interesting, and meaningful for the audience. I also love a good photograph. If we're talking about tornadoes, it helps to see what an F0 tornado might look like as far as damage goes versus an F5. And again, still give credit. I did not take these photographs, so I have to give credit to my source. All right, so just some interesting images here with various forms of damage. And here we can see as we get towards that F5, it just gives us a good visual there of the destruction that would happen with a tornado. Now, since we're videoing, we're not going to have to worry about giving handouts, but at some point you may be asked to give a presentation for some colleagues, or a presentation in the classroom or at the workplace. Handouts are great, but I would recommend not giving out a handout until the very end of your presentation. What I like to do is I might say at the beginning of my speech, I might say, I have some handouts for you guys, and I'm going to put them here on this table. Feel free to get them before you leave today. That way, my audience knows a handout is coming, but they're not looking at the handout instead of listening to me. So I like handouts, but I'm going to just tell them they're there and get them at the end. We're not going to have to worry about this for online public speaking. That's just a note for the future. Also, let's move forward here. Always have your visuals prepared in advance. That way your PowerPoint is ready to go when you're ready to go. Keep your visual aids simple. This is not to show off your artistic ability. Your visuals are to supplement your message. Make sure we can see them. Use fonts that are easy to read. Use a limited number of fonts. Use color effectively. We probably won't have the advantage of using a whiteboard during our presentations, but again, I don't like using the whiteboard a lot, even in my classes, because my back is turned to the audience and I don't have the best handwriting. Always make sure that your audience can see your visuals. If you're showing an object in your video, you want to make sure that you're showing it so that your audience can see that object. Same with PowerPoint. Screencast-O-Matic, if you decide to use this, you're going to have to be careful because you've seen what it does. It cuts off PowerPoints, so you may have to kind of squeeze everything in the middle so that this program isn't cutting off your visuals. These are things we have to think about with online presentations using visuals. We don't really have to worry about visual aids and passing them amongst the audience, but our audience members can get distracted easily. Try to only display your visuals while you're talking about them. Talk to your audience and not your visuals and explain them clearly. They can't explain